Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I am speaking with Thomas Sheedy. Thomas is, I'm sorry, I'm going to get this wrong. You're the president and the founder of Atheists For Liberty.
That's correct.
So, I've been following some of your stuff for a little bit. And like there's people who are, I think on your advisory board, like Colin Wright and a couple others that I follow. And so keep seeing, things for Atheists For Liberty come up. And then on the other side, there was a lot of controversy coming from other, I guess, left-leaning atheist groups. Because I don't want to put you as right-leaning or anything like that, but like other atheist groups that are left-leaning were just, you're complaining that you go to conservative gatherings and things like that. So I was just wondering if you could talk about Atheists For Liberty, like why you started it, why you thought something like that was needed, and then
Well, yes, absolutely. I love talking about the history of Atheists For Liberty because it's something I'm very quite proud of. But first, I want to say thank you so much for having me on. I know we've been going back and forth trying to make this happen, so I'm glad that now this is occurring. So, when it comes to the history of Atheists For Liberty, like yourself, I was heavily involved in the new atheist movement. It was this movement that was sweeping the West, especially the United States, Canada, a lot of English-speaking nations, pushing for reason, pushing for secularism, and pushing for the acceptance of atheism, the normalization of atheism. I served in multiple different positions throughout a lot of think tanks and 501c3 nonprofits here in the States. From when I was in high school all the way up into my college years, I dedicated myself to being an atheist activist. I wanted to push for Enlightenment values, the same values that has kept our civilization intact, while simultaneously saying that as a godless person, I deserve to be socially, at least, treated equally alongside my religious peers. And the new atheist movement was growing all the way up from the early 2000s into the mid 2010s, but around the time of 2015, 2016, we saw the rapid decline of the new atheist movement. And it was because these organizations, which were meant to be, at least be politically neutral and ideologically neutral when it came to non-separation between church and state issues, got involved in other different matters and injected their woke, left-leaning, or far left-leaning, or whatever you want to call it, social justice views into these organizations and into the movement, which quickly led to a rapid divide and later collapse. Now, when I was at the second Reason Rally in 2016, the Reason Rally is meant to be the largest gathering of atheists in the world. They did that successfully nearly 10 years ago. In 4 days, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of the first rally, but I went to the 2016 rally, and it had only a few hundred to maybe 1,000, 2,000 people max. We saw a rich, vibrant movement that was bipartisan collapse in just a few short years because we allowed social justice to take priority over atheism and secularism. When I realized this, I led my local atheist group at the time, the Long Island Atheists, for a few years, trying to think of what to do. And then when I transferred from community college into university, I came to the conclusion that a lot of the work that the new atheists were doing and a lot of the work that the atheist movement was doing was left unfinished, that there was still a lot of good that could be done in the name of organized atheism here in the United States. And not only that, there's a lot of things that can be done that the atheist movement made mistakes in doing that we can work on ourselves. So I came together with a few veterans of the new atheist movement, people that have experience in these nonprofits and organizations who are not woke and wanted to see the work of organized atheism continue. And I helped found Atheists For Liberty.
Okay. You'd mentioned, there's quite a bit there. So, well, for the first thing, like on my end of it, I don't know if I'd say I was ever part of like new atheism or anything like that. I was overseas until 2014. So, and then I left before social media was a thing. So there was like, I wasn't, yes, I was an atheist, but I wasn't like, there was no way for me to be vocal about it. And it wasn't something I thought about a lot either. It was just when I got back from overseas and I saw the, like I said, I got called a white supremacist for criticizing Islam. And like I come from a Muslim background and I just like, where's that coming from? So I was just looking at it from that end. And I got involved with XMNA and I was more so for Sarah and Muhammad's stance on free speech than anything else. That's it's pretty much the only dog I have in any fight is like, free expression. And I don't
Yeah.
care, just like if we don't have that, we don't have anything else. So like,
And
that's
that used to be a core element of what we were fighting for in the atheist community. Especially in a post 9/11 world, we as atheist organizations and atheist activists are saying you should be able to criticize the religion of Islam just like we can criticize anybody's political ideology, any other religion. But especially around the mid 2010s, 2014, with the Bill Maher Ben Affleck debate, where I saw that live, there was a culture that brewed in the atheist community of how dare you criticize Islam? I can criticize Christianity all day long. I can call Christians names. I can do this and that. But if you dare go after the religion of Islam, the religion of minorities here in the United States, or the religion of a minority group in another country, therefore you are a bigot. Therefore you are a racist. Therefore you are a white supremacist. They called Sam Harris, Bill Maher white supremacists. I woke up after that infamous interview that happened on Real Time, and I saw on my Facebook newsfeed national leaders, state leaders, and local leaders in the atheist community going after Bill Maher and Sam Harris because they didn't fit into the social justice intersectional hierarchy. That even though they were atheists that were criticizing Islam just like they were criticizing Christianity from a rational new atheist point of view, they were still attacked. And we saw this rapidly unfold during those years, where people who were criticizing Islam just like they were criticizing Christianity and Judaism, all of a sudden they were bigots, even though they were praised by this movement for over a decade.
Yeah. But like, I just want to stick with the Islam thing for a second, because then move on from that. But you'd mentioned the Reason rally in 2016. So I'd gone to that, and there wasn't a lot of people. I think, like you said, between 5 and 10 at like the peak of it at any point, like, like during midday type of thing, but 5 and 10,000. But okay, so I was wearing this T-shirt that said, "There's a picture of the Prophet Muhammad on the back of my shirt," and on the back of it said, "No, there isn't. Just kidding. Please don't kill me. Like, praise Allah," or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's funny.
Okay, overall the reaction was pretty positive when people saw that. Like, I had a bunch of cops at one point like, "Oh, we got to take pictures with the shirt," and so they're like,
yep.
So that was, but there was a fairly large, I'd say maybe about 20% of the people got really pissed off of that shirt. And it's like Islamophobic, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but this is, it's Reason Rally. It's supposed to be like a gathering of atheist groups. And it's just,
right.
I know it was only one day, but there was, running to people over the weekend. I had another shirt that said, "No, it's cool. Jesus died for my sins," and everyone loved that one. They thought it was great. Like, I didn't have any complaints about that one whatsoever.
And do you know what's so sad? 4 years prior, at the first rally, with the 30,000 people in the rain showing up for the first event, you would have not gotten hate for that shirt. You had Richard Dawkins on stage at the first rally saying mock and ridicule these beliefs. Now in 2016, there was a rapid administrative shift. Social justice became the priority and not secularism, not atheism. And that's why you got attacked, because the majority of atheists who are normal people who would like that shirt of yours, they didn't show up. Thunderfoot made numerous different videos criticizing the rally's organization, and honestly, rightfully so. But when I showed up there, I was in high school. I was just about to graduate, and I wanted to get my career started in these think tanks, having the same mentality as you, by the way. And I enjoyed myself still, because I got to be among many heroes that I still looked up to who still weren't kicked out of the movement yet. But it still wasn't the same. It wasn't what I thought it would be. And that's because of this insane, ugly, negative transformation of this once vibrant, rich movement that could have changed the world for the better.
Now, again, I look at this from, like I said, I got back in 2014. So I'm, when I was overseas, time to time, I'd watch videos by Sam Harris or Hitchens and things like that. And, like Hitchens, I'd known before. I'd read his articles, earlier, before like the whole new atheist movement or whatever. One of the things I found, or when I look back at it in hindsight, I kind of blame, I don't want to say blame or anything, but I kind of look at these are people I have incredible amount of respect for, but like Harris and Dawkins, Dennett to some extent, not Hitchens so much, because when I find like Dawkins, especially Dawkins and Harris, they were so strident, and not that Hitchens wasn't strident, but Hitchens talked about Enlightenment values a lot more than Dawkins and Harris did. Dawkins and Harris would, okay, you need the critical thinking, you need to think critically, follow science, but they put that on such a pedestal. Like now, I'm kind of extrapolating from what I've seen from ex-Muslims, especially younger ones. So like I said, I started getting involved in this in 2014, 2015, and they were so repressed before they got to university, let's just say, and what they were allowed to read was very limited, what they were allowed to see was very limited. They had in some cases no non-Muslim friends, and then they get to college, or they might have heard like junior and senior year in high school or a little before, they might have heard some stuff from Harris and Dawkins, or like the four horsemen, or whatever you want to call it, and they get to college and they're like, okay, these are the intelligent people. These are the smart people. This is critical thinking. These people have thought things through. Now, if they had gone into any of the humanities, like STEM really hadn't been infected, but if they got into the humanities and they're like, oh, well, they see something that's like critical race theory. Okay, it's anti-racism, or, gender theory or queer theory, like, fighting transphobia, fighting homophobia, fighting all this stuff. So like, oh, this is the exact opposite of the Abrahamic faiths. That's what I'm going to go towards, because, and then, my heroes have been telling me that these people know what they're talking about, and these are educated, and, they have PhDs and blah, 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 blah.
They're following the science.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I find that people like Dawkins and Harris talked about it, but didn't really give the tools. And I think that's one of the issues with any kind of movement, like with the atheism movement or anything like that, is, you go to church every week and you get that reinforced. People keep going back to see Anthony Robbins and get that whatever self-confidence message like reinforced over and over and over again. But you'd watch a couple of Harris videos or Dawkins videos or whatever videos by Dennett, anyone, like, any of these people, but it wasn't like it was a reinforced message and they weren't explaining it. So I'm kind of thinking like they turned a blind eye to what was really going on campuses, and they turned a blind eye to what was going on. My whole thing was, I was trying to figure out why I was being called a white supremacist for criticizing Islam, where they were just denouncing it, but they weren't looking into it further. And I think they kind of pushed a lot of people into the arms of this woke movement, because they said, oh, well, in college, the educated people will tell you what to do, and instead of like the priests will tell you what to do.
Right. And in a sense, I'll defend them on this. I would make the argument that liberalism, or Team Blue, I guess from a US perspective, right, it was different, I would argue, in the early 2010s compared to later on in the decade. I think when this campus madness and the social justice division started happening on college campuses, and the atheist movement, Gamergate, and then later on throughout our entire society, both in the public and private sectors, I think that this surprised Richard Dawkins. I think that this surprised people like Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, because they were so used to blue liberalism being this kind of Enlightenment opposition to theocracy, this opposition to this trad social conservatism that at the time was like anti-gay marriage, anti-bodily autonomy in many respects, anti-contraception, sexual education, procreationism. And through a very, very short amount of time, though, we saw these gigantic shifts in all of politics, to where now I would personally make the argument that moderate conservatives and libertarians and people in the conservative movement and some Republicans, some of them actually echo more of the values of what I thought Democrats and what I thought like Enlightenment liberal IDW types had in the early 2010s. I find myself ideologically to be the same, but I find a completely different political sect in the United States to be echoing my values more. So I think it was very surprising for Dawkins, because he was so reliant on his side being the Enlightenment side. And I think also just being somebody who was in academia for so long, for, in those decades without having those problems, I think he just didn't get it. Additionally, when you're so famous And when you're being platformed so much, you have kind of this limited view of what you can kind of see. Richard Dawkins at the time in 2016, when the movement really went downhill, the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science merged with CFI, the Center for Inquiry, and he was being platformed everywhere, and he was just being shown, and I would argue, all the positives that were still going on in the movement through this administrative lens. And then I'll also agree with you on Hitchens. Hitchens, in comparison to the other three horsemen, he came from a more political and ideological and historical place. Dawkins is hard science, Dennett is hard science, Sam Harris is kind of hard science, right? Hitchens is the Vanity Fair journalist that will get waterboarded just to see how it feels. He is the one who will say anything to stand for his values and his principles. He's the one who went on talk shows even before New Atheism was popular, talking about political issues and current events, right? He emigrated to the United States decades prior because ideologically he saw the United States as a beacon of Jeffersonian freedom. Compared to the others, where they kind of got looped in to the atheist fight because of things that happened to them, Hitchens was ready to get in like a day or two after 9/11. So I totally get that. I totally understand that. But I still do have sympathy for, in many regards, these blue IDW liberal types who still kind of didn't get it. And some of them who are still not getting it, who are coming over the fence now, because I'll say from my own perspective, it was a shock to me. But some others who have gone through things that are way worse, I can only imagine what it's like for them.
No, I mean, look, I can understand that. And okay, people have a limited amount of bandwidth. People can only focus on certain things that, so many things at once. I get all that. But here's the thing, like, I just still look at them and saying, okay, maybe I was, the metaphorical frog thrown in the boiling water, and they were sitting in there and just taking in the heat and so because like I said, I was gone from 2002 to 2014, so I missed the buildup. I just saw it, like, I came back when the crazy exploded off campus.
It was fun,
and so it was just like, I'm like, what the hell's going on? So but again, I just still think, like, maybe Harris not so much because he was out of academia. He once he got his PhD, he didn't really stick around. But people like Dennett, Dennett, okay, fine, he was doing sciences, but I mean, he was doing like social sciences more than the hard sciences, and he should have seen what was going on in academia. I mean, Dawkins, like I said, he was, Dawkins was a science communicator. I don't know if he's still a professor at that point or if he was just writing. I don't know where his career was.
I think he retired around 15, 16, or 17.
Yeah. So I mean, like, but I think he was so siloed off that they didn't look like that was my thing. It's like, you guys are talking about enlightenment values, and if you're really curious about why, some girl is screaming at Nicholas Christakis in 2015 that they're not there to create an intellectual space for her at Yale, and it's like, what the hell else is Yale for? Like, I mean, that's like, I think maybe they were scared to look, or they didn't want to look, or or they were blind, especially when Trump came along. I mean, Sam Harris just went way off the board there. It's like, he didn't look at anything else. And it was just like, you didn't look at what was causing that to happen. That's just my feeling of it. And again, like, I'm not trying to be harsh. I respect these people. I think they're intelligent. I think, especially Dawkins, like what he's done in biology, what he's done in science is amazing. Like, I don't want to take any of that away. I just think that there was a blind spot on their side.
Oh, definitely. You and I are on the same exact page, and I get really, really frustrated. For some people in the atheist movement, they had to have their lives destroyed for them to finally see what mess they caused. Look at Richard Carrier, for instance, right? He was the quote unquote intellectual artillery of Atheism Plus. And for those in your viewership who don't know what Atheism Plus is, this was the platform that the woke infiltration of atheism called itself. They officially titled it Atheism Plus Social Justice. And Carrier was seen as the intellectual artillery of it, and he got Me Too'd. He got Me Too'd. I would argue false Me Too'd. Along with a few of the others in the movement, David Silverman, former president of American Atheists, who's now the advisory board chair of Atheists For Liberty, by the way. People such as Michael Shermer as well. They Shermer was always against the woke stuff, but for Silverman and for Carrier, they had to have their lives completely ruined for them to wake up and realize, oh my God, I was in this administrative level in the atheist movement thinking that what I was doing was good, when in reality, I I aided in killing this movement. I aided in killing this community, all in the name of feminism, all in the name of social justice, all in the name of inclusion. Um, it's very possible also, and I state this as myself, I was one of the scared ones. When those 2 years after the Reason Rally, when I was an 18-year-old leading a local American Atheists affiliate group, and I was also an assistant state director for American Atheists. I was in a lot of positions still within the national orgs at the time. I didn't know really who at that top administrative level, was secretly thinking like I was, like, oh my God, this social justice madness is crazy. What are we going to do? I saw everybody rapidly criticizing Myth Informed, Mythicist Milwaukee in 2017 when they had their MythCon 4, MythCon 5 conference. This rapid condemnation of daring to have Sargon of Akkad and Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic on the stage, at their event. Somehow that's anti-atheist and anti-secularism and anti-humanist. So I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to. And I was kind of in the trenches. Laying low. I eventually came to the conclusion in 2019 that I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. But if there is a fear component, if there is a fear factor within people similar to Dawkins and similar to Harris, I understand that too. But I would make the argument now that my patience for that is now, getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Because organizations like Atheists for Liberty now exist. You have intellectuals that are speaking up against the madness on college campuses. You have people that have put their careers on the line for you, who are fighting now back against critical race theory, who are fighting back against woke feminism going everywhere, against social justice infiltrating all of our institutions. Now is not the time to stay quiet anymore. Now is the time for people to get on board and to fight for something. Not to just create a void by fighting against something, but to stand up for the values that have made our civilization great. So I don't know if it was fear. I don't know if it was with some of them. I don't know if it was, some of the other factors I listed. But either way, 2022 is no longer 2016-17. Now we have platforms where we can fight against this. So if you are a fan of Richard Dawkins, if you are a fan of Sam Harris, you really do have to get on board now at this point. Atheists for Liberty is growing every single day. We have volunteer committees that are rapidly growing. We have a state director program. We are building up the infrastructure to now we don't have to be afraid of these woke atheist bloggers who are going to ruin your reputation if you say something that goes against the party line. Those days are over. And that's my long rant. I go on long tangents. I say this on every podcast I go on, but it's for a reason. Yeah, it's for a reason, because I think I hold the same frustrations that you do when it comes to this. I've been in this community now for a long time. I started to get involved more heavily around the time that you got involved when you got back from overseas. And I have this anger and I have this frustration that now we can't, sit in the corner and wonder who's woke, who's not woke. The point is that if you really are against this social justice madness, you got to get involved. You got to get involved and you got to speak.
Yeah, there's, when you're talking about the fear and all that, but there's one thing, like, I want to just get back to something. I agree with you about the fear. And I mean, I definitely know about that. Like, like anyone who speaks out against Islam, that's something you got to worry about right there. But I don't know if you read Macon Phelps Roper's book. I think it was called Unfollowed. So
no, I haven't.
There was one, like, it was right at the start, and she's talking about her grandfather. And okay, this is not a defense of the Westboro Baptist Church or anything like that, but her grandfather said, okay, I want you to go out and read all these books. Like, so he pushed her to read Arguments for Free Speech. He pushed her to read all these things because he was like, this is what your enemy believes, and I want you to know what your enemy's doing. And I find that, especially in the atheist movement, like I said, when I came back, there was like the first thing I saw, like when I saw some of this woke stuff, and I wasn't everyone, like in 2014, it wasn't that persuasive. I think it would, it'd gotten through a large chunk of it, but it still was the minority, where oh, don't read this, don't read that. You can't talk about this. You can't talk about that. I'm like, okay, blasphemy laws. And it just, and then when I'm reading, her book, and it's talking about the Westboro Baptist Church, it's talking about, her grandfather founded it. And he's actually living out Mill, he that only knows his side of the argument knows little of that. And he's telling her, go out and see the other argument, read it. Where
the people who think that Fred Phelps was this dumb idiot who didn't know his talking points, didn't know how to wage a cultural war effectively, that's not true. He was involved in the civil rights movement, actually, decades prior, back in the 1960s, 1970s, because according to his wacko, religious logic, God is against gays, but not against blacks. And because of that, he was actually involved in the civil rights movement. But he has had a long history of being involved with numerous different other communities and politics, and learning, other people's backgrounds. And the Westboro Baptist Church has waged a very effective, and they still wage a very effective war against many of our allies. And they still do it very effectively because they know optics. They know how to get people's attention. It's why they've been around for so long. So that what you're telling me doesn't surprise me at all. I know Fred Phelps passed away a few years ago, but the institution still stands because he built something that still is still able to cause quite a ruckus in American politics.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I don't want to get too deep into this, and again, I'm just going by what I read in the book. But
sure,
he, after his passing, the church lost that leadership with that vision, so it's become more. Again, I'm just going by what I read in her book. It's gone more towards a more fundamentalist, and it's losing that aspect of actually seeking out what the other side is saying, and it's just, okay, we know this, and this is true. And unfortunately, like I said, from about 2014, I started seeing it in a lot of the atheist groups. And again, I shouldn't say groups, it was more individually. Like the first person I noticed this in was what's her name, Ina. Like, she goes by Nice Mangoes. I mean, like right away, I just started seeing in her, like, I mean, initially I listened to some of her interviews, and they're, okay, these are pretty good, whatever. But then it just, this steep curve towards woke social justice, insanity, like right away. And it just, actually, I think she was one of the first people I saw, aside from Ben Affleck, but like really pushing that Sam Harris is a white supremacist. And I'm like, okay, but to me, it was like, okay, you're calling me a white supremacist because I say the same thing as Sam Harris, and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I started seeing this too with numerous different YouTubers that I watched, a lot of people in national orgs that I was following at the time. And this is why during those 2 years after the Reason Rally, when I was 18, 19, even 20, bits of me being 20, I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who was really on board with this stuff and who really wasn't. I was just in the trenches playing the survival game in the atheist community. But it's really disheartening. But here's the good news now. And I said this a few minutes ago. We now have infrastructure in place for atheists who no longer have to be in the closet about opposing the social justice madness. Now Atheists for Liberty exists. Before 2019, there wasn't any national 501c3 nonprofit that was openly standing against the social justice religion, that was openly willing to oppose crazy religions from all different corners of society. But back in the day, if you were opposed to social justice, you were called a radical. You were attacked on blogs. You were, Thunderfoot was seen as a pariah in the atheist community very early on for being one of the early voices on YouTube to stand up against this stuff. My communications manager, Justin Vakula, he was one of the early people too, standing up against woke feminism taking over the conference scene. It really was a show of fear, I would say. When you're at these conferences, I didn't know who to trust.
But again, I don't want to say I've given up or anything, but for me, it's just like like I said, the only dog I have in any fight is free speech, and I'm just like, I'm defending my Enlightenment values, and because I look at you know, take someone like Matt Dillahunty. And I don't want to, I don't want to be picking on people, but I mean, like, Matt's got a big enough following, and he's large enough that I criticize him. But okay, the transgender issue, and when he's like, completely going after Dawkins, I'm like, okay, but you talked about following the science, you talked about listening to reason, whatever, and you're just discounting anything Dawkins says because he doesn't believe in your ideology. And I'm just looking at these, and again, I wonder if it was they were told what to think, and they moved from one set of beliefs to another because the other seemed diametrically opposed to what they'd come from, but they never learned a new way of thinking. And I think someone like Dillahunty is exemplifying that. Like I mean, it is a new religion. Like you mentioned, religions of all types, right? Like, so, yeah.
And with Dillahunty, it's very unfortunate. I used to watch the Atheist Experience all the time when they had live streams online on their website. When I was in high school, I would every Sunday, I believe that's when they aired. I would watch Matt Dillahunty all the time. I would binge old clips of him because he was on the show from 2005 to now. I would watch as many Matt Dillahunty clips as possible because he was seen as one of these fiery, amazing, militant atheist types too. And the problem is that he always hung around the local atheist groups and the unlike Dawkins and Harris and the others who were kind of in this intellectual sphere where they were more in their own world. So they thought a little more clearly beyond the group mentality. And by the way, I do love organizing groups. I lead one. But with Dillahunty, he stayed around the grassroots sect of atheism, which got corrupted and polluted very easily by social justice, right? The Atheist Experience is part of the Atheist Community of Austin, and the Atheist Community of Austin got very, very, very woke, so much so that in 2019, when you had Rationality Rules, he's an atheist YouTuber speaking up, I wouldn't say speaking up against trans sports, or transgender women in sports, but at least questioning it and having a conversation about it where there could be potential criticism. He was denounced by the Atheist Community of Austin. Matt Dillahunty as well as an individual, he's had a pattern of just over the last several years being against anti-woke atheists and atheists who might be of different political ideologies. When MythCon 4 happened in 2017, Sargon of Akkad tried to pull him over and have a rational conversation with him to try to personally connect. And Matt Dillahunty, I was told this by the MythCon organizers, the myth-informed organizers, he just immediately pulled away. He went over to the MythCon organizers and he said, yeah, this big tent atheism thing, this cannot work. Don't you notice how when it comes to the big tent and accepting atheists of all views to really build a dynamic atheist community and atheist movement, it wasn't quote unquote our side, the non-social justice, non-atheism plus side, that backed away and cooperating and working together. It was them. Matt Dillahunty, for a long time, I thought was a big tent guy. Same with Seth Andrews, who I recently came to the conclusion is not. He is completely drank the woke Kool-Aid. Same with Hemant Mehta, right, for Friendly Atheist. He has gone after me now numerous times and has gone after Atheists for Liberty and David Silverman, advisory board chair of AFL for sport at this point. These people are not the rational thinkers either that we thought they were or that they used to be. Maybe they grifted and saw where the wind was blowing within their organization's circles. But either way, now they're just attacking us for sport. Now they are not standing up for what we used to think they stood for. And it stinks because I loved Matt Dillahunty. He was so entertaining, and I loved the way he cut through Christianity and cut through religious belief like it was soft butter on his show. It's why the Atheist Experience, which was originally a boring call-in show that started in 1997, became this huge, massive thing to where Matt Dillahunty gained so much fame and popularity that you could see him on stage with Jordan Peterson in 2016 or 2017. And to see him turn into what we see him as today, this social justice freak.
Yeah, I mean, okay,
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, 100%. But it's also, I mean, I'll get back to Dillahunty in a second because there's something I saw of him in 2015 that just kind of like rung some alarm bells for me. But
Mhm.
all of them collectively, like Dillahunty, Seth Andrews, you mentioned Haymat met that, like all these people, like I just that whole form of it, because I do believe this is a religion. I think John McWhorter and like James Lindsay were like right on the money, because it's the
They are.
first thing I saw. I'm like, new blasphemy laws. But I started calling them woke evangelicals. I'm like, you're going around evangelizing this woke nonsense, and you're nothing but. You're just, you're just, and it's sad because, again, like you said, these were people who were pushing critical thinking. These were people who were pushing, learning the other side. They were at least espousing enlightenment values, if but I saw so much of it. I just like I got disheartened. I mean, I don't want to harp on a lot of people here, but when I saw, you know, Armin from Atheist Republic, and Armin was someone I considered a friend. Like when he starts burning the Quran and like pissing on it, I'm like, you don't burn books you disagree with. I mean, I saw what the people in Iran were doing, and then this is when Armin really started pushing it. So there were all these people who were like said like the burn the Quran challenge, and I was like, no. I'm like, show them a better way. Like I understand why
Yeah.
people in Iran are that frustrated and why they want to do it, but like don't push that way. That's especially like Armin, with the podcast he does with Ali, they call it a Muslim,
Secular jihadists.
for a Muslim enlightenment. I'm like, but
Yeah.
the enlightenment wasn't the enlightenment because of the glow of bonfires of burning books. Like, don't push that. And then when I see things like that gets me really.
So I understand where you're coming from, because, and actually this was a debate that we've been having in the atheist community for a very long time, prior even to the social justice stuff. The whole mentality of firebrand versus diplomat, militant atheism versus a more soft approach to communicating atheism or humanism or secularism or secular values or whatever you want to call it. This was always something that we've gotten into discussions for. Personally, with me, I actually don't mind it, because there are some people that are really turned on by the fiery mentality, and this is my logic. And I've seen this. Speaking of David Silverman, I've like repeated him for like a third time. He's gone through a model as to why firebrand atheism and militant atheism is actually good, even for the soft atheists. Basically, the hardcore atheists, the hardline atheists, they do something crazy like that, or they do something big like that. They get a lot of mainstream media attention or press, and then for the atheists that they do something, but they normalize a certain issue because they get that media attention right away. Then what happens is, even for the atheists that maybe don't like that or have more of a softer approach, it then normalizes these more softcore organizations or softcore activists that have a different approach. In a way, the hardcore hardline atheists are pulling in an Overton window to normalize the better, or the softer, or maybe in your case, the better approach. So I understand and I get that. I have different concerns with Armin.
Yeah.
And I personally, Armin, whenever I have been on Atheist Republic streams, I was a guest on Secular Jihadists too, back in 2020. I still don't think that he fully understands the mentality that we have at Atheists For Liberty of trying to be bipartisan, and not just appear like we're blue liberals. He doesn't think that the conservative movement, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't want to like fully attack him here. This is why I think, and Armin, if you're hearing this, if you want to chat with me about it, I'm totally down. But I think he doesn't understand fully the importance, to a degree, of being heavily involved still in 2022 in the conservative movement. I still also think that he wants to cling on to being associated with people like Hemant Mehta and Seth Andrews and these atheist activists who have gone so far off the deep end. I think because Atheist Republic was in that movement and in that community for so long, that I think maybe from an administrative perspective, they have a fear of letting go of that atheist infrastructure that still exists, because they've seen I bet they've seen the attacks that we've gotten from people like Hemant. They've seen the attacks and criticisms that people like Justin Bakula, who's our communications manager, got from Seth Andrews. And maybe they are so worried that they'll be alone in the ether with not much support in the United States if they dare to fully break away now. And also, I know Armin thinks that being anti-woke is like criticizing anti-woke people is very fun too, and it's like a funny sport, and it's just as good as criticizing woke people. I know that he likes to be this kind of free spirit in a way, but simultaneously we have to be organized and we have to be together and we have to stand for joint values. And if you're associating with people who are just going to eventually kick you off the bandwagon one day and eventually call you a racist, and eventually where the window of social justice is going to be pulled so far in that eventually you'll be seen as a pariah, I would make the argument now, just get off the train at that point. Get off the train at that point and join up with the people who are willing to stand by you for these values. Like I saw Atheist Republic also. I don't want to make this a whole criticism of Atheist Republic, but in July they stopped sharing Michael Sherlock's books on their social media. Michael Sherlock was the former executive director of Atheist Alliance International. He's now an advisory board member of Atheists For Liberty, and they stopped continuing his books, and they were attacking him when just a few months prior they were really tight. They were really good friends. And I've started to, and if Susanna, Armin, if you guys think I'm incorrect here, you can certainly chat with me about it. But I've been seeing them try to be closer with orgs like American Atheists and the orgs that have gone more woke. And that's not going to work. Eventually, you're going to get criticism from the social justice crowd for burning the Quran, if they haven't already. Yeah. From these organizations and institutions. And I think they are just trying, they did what I did. They are trying to just stay in that mess as long as they can before they get kicked out. And I would make the argument at this point, don't do that. Don't do that. It's really unwise. And I think eventually, I think it's going to just stall work that you can do now to try to band together with people that have way more in common with you than people who don't.
Yeah. I mean, okay, look, I get that, the strategic point of it. My whole thing with like burning the Quran or anything like that is there's already that huge censorious streak going through, woke atheism or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're actually purporting to be for, civil liberties and freedom of expression and freedom of speech, your message should echo that, and it should strengthen that. Burning a book because you don't like its ideas, even if it's, he's like, oh, it's my book, and you can get electronic copies. I hear all his excuses, and to me that's sophistry. It's like, yeah, it's your book, you can do with it, but you know what? Like, I actually made a video about that when this first started going in Iran, when people were burning the Quran. I said a better protest is to take the Quran, put it on your bookshelf, take a book like On Liberty, or take a book like Areopagitica, or take Thomas Paine, and read that and spread that message. If you want to get a message out into Iran, it's just showing them, because I'm just like, you're just sitting in your own blasphemy laws. You're just, you're doing exactly what the mullahs do. You're doing what, the Catholics in Poland and the Catholics in some of the southern states were doing when they were burning Harry Potter books because, it's witchcraft. And then it's the same as what the woke were doing because J.K. Rowling's is transphobic, right? So I'm like, get away from the fundamentalism. And
to a degree, I would definitely fully agree with you. And I think there should be more spaces in our community for people who agree with that mentality. Not everybody has to be a firebrand. Not everybody has to be militant. But here's the good news with what I said about pulling the Overton window. So you have ex-Muslims who do that, right? And we should be, of course, supporting them and not ostracizing them. They are our allies and they are our friends in this. But then also, it has allowed for, I hate to use progressive language too much, but actual diversity of thought when it comes to this. Now you have organizations like, I'm assuming of Ideas Beyond Borders, which exists to spread Enlightenment thought, Enlightenment values, and translate popular text into the native languages in the Middle East and other parts of the world, in order to effectively communicate that liberty is a good principle that should be fought for in those regions of the world. That Enlightenment value should be protected and encouraged in those regions of the world. So, and I saw this positively happen in the atheist community as well. Before the social justice takeover, that firebrand diplomat diversity. And I think if we can educate more people on that, encourage that business model where I don't think those people are going to stop burning the Quran. So let's just make sure that while those people do that, or if those people do that and they don't get burned out, people like yourself and organizations like Ideas Beyond Borders are able to also come in and provide another option. So we can get everybody in the fight.
Look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should ostracize people for burning. And I'll look at someone in Iran, like some person in Iran videoing themselves burning the Quran because they're completely frustrated and they don't see any other
Mhm.
option. I take that differently than Armin going into a parking lot and just burning a Quran for shits and giggles. No, but
Mhm.
there's a difference there, right? There's a guy, he's in Sweden right now. His name was Omar Makram, and he became famous because he was trying to get uh, immigration or refugee status in Sweden, and he was having some difficulties. So he videoed himself burning a Quran, and he got death threats, and then right away he got the refugee status. And so he was doing that not out of the sake of I hate this book, I want to burn it, but he's like, yeah, this is what's going to happen to me if I burn the book. And so, like, I'm still opposed to burning the book, but I mean, I try to differentiate the different things. Like, there's a reason you're doing it, and what is that reason you're doing it? I mean, and I can disagree with the reason. I could try to show you something better, but yeah, I don't want to ostracize people. But you mentioned ideas beyond borders, and this is something that, like, I look at some of the woke stuff, and when you mention ideas beyond borders, it's some of the woke stuff actually is having a harm for organizations like Ideas Beyond Borders, and it's
Yes.
also having harm. There's a woman, Vish. I'm just let me get her name. I've spoken to her recently, and she's from India, and Vaishnavi Sundar, and she writes about how the gender ideology in India is taking away women's rights before they can actually get them.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, especially like I know Faisal very well. I know Melissa fairly well, and
Mhm.
I've spoken to some people from Ideas Beyond Borders, and one of the biggest pushbacks they get is post-colonial theory. Oh, this is Western values. This is just colonialism again. And then you look at I think it was the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I could be wrong about the university, but 2016 they held a conference that said science must fall. And that conference, they had it 2 years in a row. Then last year, that same university announced that they were going to be teaching black physics. Okay, so we're exporting this crazy way of thinking to countries that haven't gotten full, like they never got onto the Enlightenment,
Yeah.
And
it's like we're stopping them. It's like
yeah,
like for example, I'm in favor of combating climate change,
yeah.
for instance, but I don't like it when we, as modern Western nations, then go to underdeveloped nations and say, "Oh, I'm so glad you just got cars. I'm so glad you just got the automobile. You have to stop that now."
Yeah, exactly.
No, I see it as the same mentality.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, that's one of my biggest worries with this stuff. Is it's I joke. I shouldn't. I kind of joke about it with like China. I'm like, China like did the Belt and Road thing, and they're okay. That's all for China's benefit, but at least they're doing something in these countries where we're exporting this really hideous ideology that is harming these people. Like, I mean, okay, I don't want to take that language again, but it is another form of colonialism. We're pushing this like purely Western thought that should have stayed on the academy and never left.
Yeah.
And we're pushing this on these developing countries, just like you said. It's like with the environmental stuff, like, oh, don't burn fossil fuels, just go to solar. But like they haven't even built up, their
and I would eventually like them to find other energy means. Like I'm still, by the way, in favor of environmentalism. I even me being on the right personally, I'm still on board with that. But we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic, and we have to make sure that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. And us in going into South Asia, us going into the Middle East, and having them trade in one form of extremism with another, it's not going to help at all.
Nope.
It's going to kill all the efforts we claim to hold in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at again. I try to be very careful on things like this. Like, there's a thing in Pakistan called the Aurat March, which is like the women's march in Pakistan. And I mean, it's a lot different than the women's march in 2017 with the pussy hats and all that. Like like it's a lot different than that. But there is some, when you listen to the rhetoric from the leadership, there is some of this same kind of ideology coming through, and it's like, this is not what Pakistan needs. Pakistan needs women to get their rights. Pakistan needs women to be able to leave their homes without an escort. Pakistan needs women to be able to not have to wear the hijab and the niqab and have that truly be a choice. They don't need, they need Milton and Mill. They don't need Judith Butler and Gail Rubens. And that's like some of the stuff. Like, I look at it more globally, and I worry about things like that. I'm like, are we Saudi Arabia exporting, Salafi Islam to all these places? And then when Saudi or some of the Middle East wants to pull back, like the outer colonies there, they're going even stricter. And I just kind of like look at it in that way.
Yeah. No, I look at it the same way. Thankfully, with Atheists for Liberty, we're more of a U.S. organization. We're not international. So I'm totally fine with people like Faisal and with people like Ayan Hirsi Ali and Yasmin Mohammed handling a lot of those matters. I don't have to. But boy, is it a struggle. And boy, do ex-Muslims who believe in Enlightenment values and are against wokeism and who are also not fans of Islam, you guys have a very big hill to climb. When it comes to that. And I will say this, though, Atheists for Liberty, we at AFL, we are big supporters of the ex-Muslim community. Unlike the woke atheist organizations in the US, we actually do want to support the efforts of ex-Muslims to combat theocracy abroad, even though we focus mostly on matters here in the West. It's every time I hear this, I sigh. But it makes me hopeful for the future because I don't like to go to bed not accomplishing anything when it comes to the fight for Enlightenment values. I like to make sure that everyday Atheists for Liberty makes an impact. And I know that for many of our allies, people like Yasmin, who's on our advisory board, I know she has a very similar mentality.
Yeah, I mean, some of the people you mentioned, like I said, I know Faisal very well. Yeah, I know Yasmin really, really well. Unfortunately, I don't know Ayan. I've met her once. But yeah, I think what they're doing, and everyone has what their focus is. Like, IBB is focusing more on, and I think what they're doing is fantastic. Like, I think that's the perfect approach. But I don't want to keep you much longer. I'm just going to ask you one last thing. Like, are you ever planning to maybe get affiliated with similar-minded atheist groups globally, or are you just going to keep your focus on the United States?
Absolutely. So we're trying to be realistic into what we do programs-wise. We want to be an alternate atheist hub for atheists in the United States and in Canada, for instance, who, can't find an atheist group in their area or a national atheist group to support that actually still believes in classic good atheist activism and fights for Enlightenment values. But simultaneously, as we grow, we do want to have more of a presence around the world. And we do want to partner with international organizations, and we want to partner with other atheist organizations in particular countries and standing up for joint values. If there are, atheists who contact our contact form, they say that they are in a certain country, for instance, where they're in trouble, we try to forward them to appropriate places where they can get the assistance they need. If there are Americans that are trying to contact those organizations into what's going on in the United States that stands for similar values, like the various organizations abroad that maybe haven't been corrupted as much by wokeism and by social justice, it is my hope that they recommend and that they show Atheists for Liberty as that place to be, because we're growing every single day. We get new members every single day. We are relaunching our streaming series on Thursday, April 14th. We have interactive member events in our Discord server, and we're growing every day in that capacity. We are doing activism on the national stage in U.S. politics. We are trying to do our best to make atheism bipartisan. We are standing up against horrible religions and ideologies, both at home and abroad. We're doing quite a lot here, and we are trying to do our best to get any and all atheists who are opposed to social justice madness, who are also opposed to theocracy, to come join us and to be a part of the fight. And we see that as a future where we can work with other organizations in accomplishing those goals.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Thomas. It was great talking to you. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate it. For those that are interested in checking us out, you can go to atheistsforliberty.org. We have memberships available along with numerous different benefits and packages that are listed. Starting membership is $12 a year. We advertise that as $1 a month. By giving $1 a month as a $12 a year payment, you get to support this great organization where we have a wonderful list of advisors and board and staff, and we're growing every single day. We have a lot of amazing programs and amazing opportunities, volunteer opportunities. We want to have grassroots programs. We have a state director program as well. really means a lot for you to have me on the show. For anybody who's interested in following us on social media, you can find us at Atheists Liberty on most platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're on Getter and Parler as well, and other alternate social media platforms as well. We have an amazing YouTube channel. So please, everybody, become a member and come check us out at atheistforliberty.org. And thank you so much again for having me on.
No problem. Thank you very much again for coming on. And I'll put all the links in the description. And thanks everyone for listening. I'll be back.